Okay, so in the next slide, we'll talk about the big picture data check or the data integrity check. What it basically means is you're looking at data errors by just looking at the data as a whole, as opposed to specific columns. So let's look at the data big picture data check in the next slide. Okay, so we're talking about general data integrity test. It's pretty simple. Um, Now, first thing is I want you to show you where I'm downloading this data from. And the textbook talks about it, and the PowerPoint presentation or the PDF that is attached to the lecture also has the link to it. Basically, you go to this particular link and you download from this chapter this particular data file. So I'm going to show you. So I'm downloading the data file here. I'm going to go to the location of the data file. Then I'm going to open it with Excel. And here it is, right? Now, one thing before we move on to working on this data that I want you to show you is the best practices. Remember, whenever you have, whenever you're working with data, you've downloaded this data, right? So make sure you use this template I talked about before, like the data you're downloading it, the name of the data, the URL, and why you're collecting this data, what do you plan to do with it, and information about the number of rows and columns and source. And this information you usually find the data documentation. And the data documentation for this particular data file can be gathered from this particular link. Again, this link will take you to this data documentation file. This data documentation file on this particular site is called metadata. It gives information about number of columns, rows, and so on and so forth. Okay, now what do you do now? Well, you need to click on the cell right here, and depending on its Windows or um, Mac, you basically click on Command and End button to go to the specific cell. And oops. So it went to the last cell saying that there are Z 26 number of columns, which again matches with the uh, data documentation file. And this data documentation file gives you information about the meaning of each of those columns. Then the other thing is how many rows there are. And you can do the same thing by moving on to, um, again, different keyboards have different options. I'm going to just command and down because my keyboard is not um, most advanced one. So I'm going to just go um, till I find the last row, right? And if you see, the last row is pretty much, let's do this. Okay, so last row is specific to 8023, which again matches with the description of it. So you're looking at number of rows and number of columns, and the number of rows you have are 8023. As you can see here, can you see that? 8023. And number of columns is 26, so it matches it. So it's as simple as that. You basically make a record of this, download the data. First, you try to see whether the data format that the file has a format of Excel. The second thing you look at is the number of columns and number of rows. So what I'll do in the following slide and the video that follows those slides, we'll talk about detailed data integrity check. Okay, so now that we know how to do a big picture data check, now it is the time to know how to do individual detailed check checks specific to each of the columns. And there are specific things that you need to do for each of the columns. And once you do it, you keep repeating it for each of those columns to determine the integrity, if there are any errors or not. So let's move on to that slide. And that slide, in that slide, I'll give a brief description of the checks that you will do under this category. And following that, you'll see a short video that will demonstrate how to do that for you. Okay, so again, everything's same. We're going to use the same data set that we used for the general integrity test. Now we're going to do the detailed integrity check. So this is the information, and according to the data file, we know that there are 25 candidates. When I say data file, I'm referring to the data documentation file, which was in Excel format. There are 25 candidate um, specific committees, right? And and then you have the unique ID, um, a unique ID that is, I think, 8 digit, if I remember correctly. Um, then each have the and each committee spends some amount, and that's what the contributions are. And we also can figure out from the data documentation that every expenditure by each candidates committee um, was reported only if the value was greater than $200. So if it's less than $200, it's not reported in the expenditure. So that's another thing keep in mind. Okay, now that we know these basics, now the thing is to actually do the data um, integrity check in a detailed fashion. Now this is very simple. You actually create pivot tables for each of the columns individually. So what the pivot table does is it creates for a given column how many unique values are there. In this case, it's the committee ID, right? So how many unique committee IDs are here? Keep in mind, it shouldn't be more than 25, right? Because we know that there are only 25 candidates, so 25 committees. And each committee is given a number, right? So there shouldn't be more than 25. And we can see like how many times each of these unique IDs uh, uh, um, are represented here. So number of unique IDs, then how often are these represented? Because there are 8,022 observations, right? So which committee is spending more would that's what it means. So now it's very simple. You need to use the insert button. And if you're using a Mac, please don't use the insert button at the top, but actually within the file, there is an insert button. Then click on the pivot table. Make sure when you do that, okay, I'm gonna actually cancel this. But before you do that, I selected this column, right? Don't do that. Make sure you just select a column, a cell, anywhere. Then click on the pivot table. Okay, it automatically will select the first row, um, and then it assumes that it will assume that it has the data header. This is called the header. Um, and first row of each data sheet is a header, which means that it represents the name of each column. So first column is for column name, second one ID, third one, fourth one, so on and so forth. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, now what it does is it creates a new sheet. So it took you from here to a new sheet, and this new sheet has this pivot table now. Now this is what will be generated once you work through these things. On the right side, in the field name, you can clearly see that there is column ID, right? And if you move that column ID to the rows, okay, then you can see the column ID lists the unique number of times um, the IDs are represented, how many unique IDs are there. Then we also want to know the frequency for each. How often did each unique ID appear in the next column? So we need to pull or move this ID to the values. Now, this has generated that this particular ID occurred 22 times. Okay, this is smart, so you know that the Excel is smart, so it knows that the ID is a text file, so it's not calculating some average because these are not numbers, right? So what it is doing is trying to calculate the frequency, the raw count of how many times each unit occurred. So this particular occurred 22 times, this particular thing occurred 993 times for a total of 8,022, which is again matches with the documentation where there are 8,022 observations, of which um, this particular committee received the least. Now let's see how many committee IDs are listed here. Now one, two, it's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Well, there are 25 candidates, but there are only 17 committees that reported their expenditure. What does it mean? Well, it's probably because the remaining 8 they did not report, because remember the documentation said that they only need to report if the expenditure is above $200. Okay, so and you do the same for each of the columns one at a time, and that would be the end of the detailed data check. Um, um, so that's that. Okay, now we're going to talk about column carving. Um, so there are two functions, especially we learn um, in this particular unit on cleaning data. One is column carving, the other one is concatenation. And then we'll talk about some few data tricks. Um, Finally, we'll move on to a different resource called OpenRefine. First, initially, let's talk about column carving. And within this, what you basically do, what we'll be doing is actually take these stuffed columns and parse them or split them into individual columns. Now, the first thing first, you need to create this data document and put all the information you need, which I suppose I hope you'll do it. I'm not going to show you that because we've already gone through that. What I'm going to do now is direct you to the data set that we'll be using to conduct the analysis um, or to do the evaluation and cleaning. So let's look at this. I want you to download this data. So I'm clicking on this. The download button is right here, and I'm opening the file, and that will take me to this file right here. Okay. Now let's look at this particular column, C, right? Now this is the particular column. What we need to do now is, if you look at it, this is the information about the dogs, um, um, the address of the dog, the dangerous dogs in an area, the zip code, the description of the dog, the latitude, longitude, location information. And if you look at this column C, the information in here is stuffed together. As you can see, there's like 4 bits of information here. Rex is the name. The other one is the gender, followed by the color and the breed itself. So now our job is to cut this into 4 individual columns. We call that carving or uh, what do you say, parsing. Okay, first what we need to do is, because there are 4 individual bits of information within one column, we need to create 4 columns now. So just click on this, right click on that and insert. It will add 1 column. I'm going to do it again, 2 columns. Do it again, 3 columns. Do it again, 4th column. What I'm going to do is, once you run this parsing formula, it will change the current column. So the best thing to do would be to copy this column, paste it in the new column you just created, and then run the thing on this particular column so that this will be changed along, and the additional 3 columns will be added to the columns that are that you just created. Okay, how does it work? Okay, so this is how you'll work. You'll select this column that you want to parse. Okay, remember we are not selecting the first column because there is no data. There is the header. just selecting the rest of the column. And then there are tabs here. Do you see that? Select the data tab and select the option that says text to column. Okay. Then this is what will appear. Now, if you see, these individual bits of information within this column are separated by commas, right? And you call such delimited option. So it's either separated by commas or tabs. Because it is separated by commas, you're going to use delimited. So specifically, what kind of it is? It is of comma. Usually you see the tab is selected, so unselect that. Usually you'll also see that there are text qualifiers, meaning that these individual bits have semicolons or colons or apostrophes or things like that, which you don't see here. So change that to none. So make sure there is only comma selected here and none is selected here. Then you can see that it's broken down into 4 bits of information. Then click next. And what you see now is that each column is of general type. Change it to text. Select here, change it to text. Select this, change it to text. Select this, change it to text. Then click next. Now what you'll see is that you have 4 different columns, right? And you can give new names now. The first one is name. The second one is the sex. The third one is the color. The fourth one is the breed. Now you can run the pivot table on this and then see and generate a pivot table. If this allows me to do it, I'm gonna not select this. I'm just gonna select the breed, put it here, rows, and just like we did before. And it takes the count. So you'll see how many of these dogs are dangerous as a function of the breed. So that's what it is. Okay, sometimes carving or parsing is not sufficient, or you may need to use more tools to actually clean the data. We'll look at one example where we need to use the trim function. And again, whenever you are working on a new data set, make sure you create this data notebook and keep a record of that. I'm going to minimize that and I'll go back to the data set that we'll be using for this particular trim function. So in the general thing, we looked at this particular data set, right? In general carving. For trim function, which is a even more detailed cleaning function, what we'll do is we'll look at this particular data set, which is about the fuel economy of the cars that were produced in 2013 in the United States. So I clicked on that, I downloaded it, and I'm going to click open it. Now for you, maybe you need to go to the download tab and then locate the file, then open it. So I'm going to make it bigger here. Notice that sometimes this gets so small that it's hard to read it in the video. So I'm going to make it a little bigger. Okay, do you see that? I hope you can see it now. Okay, I'm specifically going to a column, AC column. You see that? You see this particular information, the information in this particular column is stuffed where there are 2 kinds of information. Uh, how many wheels there are and whether it's rear or front. So it's a full wheel drive or a 2-wheel drive. If it is 2-wheel drive, it's the rear or the front and things like those. You know it. Um, Now we need to parse this. And simple parsing won't be sufficient in this case. The reason is that in the earlier example, the comma was separated by the next information. For instance, Rex, the name of the dog, was followed by comma, and there was no space. Immediately, there was the gender of it. Let's say female, then comma, no space, then the color of it, then comma, then the breed of it. But here you have this extra space, then we need to get rid of this as well, and that's why we need the trim function. We'll do the usual first, which is to parse the column. So you need 2 data bits, so 2 columns. So I'm going to add 1, 2. The next step is we need to copy this. Well, there are several ways you can do it. The simple way would be, I'm just going to do the simple way. Just select this column, copy it, paste it, and get rid of the name, the header. Okay, now we need to parse this, right? So what we need to know now is select this, or you can manually, you can double click it and it will go all the way to the end of the column. You see that? See, there you go. So all I did is I selected the first cell. Come on. Yeah. So I selected the first cell, right? I'm going to do it again. Then double click at the right bottom, right? Right click. That select the entire column from wherever you've started. Now I need to do the same thing. Data. Then what do I need to do next? Yes, good job. Text to columns. There you go. And we need what? Delimited because they're separated by commas. Next. Perfect. We need commas. It's already selected. There are no quotation marks or qualifiers. We're going to hit next. And we need to make sure that this is text type and select the next one. Change to text type. Finish. Voila, you got your stuff. And this is the, I don't know, whatever name you want to give. You can say drive type and the side, front or back or whatever we're going to give. Okay, now if you see here, this has space. You see that? If you want to see what I mean, I'm going to make it a bit bigger. Okay, if you want to see this here, there is actually space. And we should not have this space. So for that, what we need to do is we need to run the trim function. Let's look at the time. It won't go beyond 5 minutes. I'm going to pause. Okay, so how to do the trim function? So because we are trimming this particular column data set, right, we need to create a new column next to the column that you are trimming. So insert, right? Now you can say trimmed side, right? Just like I'm saying that it's a trimmed column slide. And this particular column is trimmed. So what you need to do is use this formula, equal sign, trim, parenthesis, select this column, close the parenthesis, hit enter. What? So this is what you need to do before you run the trim function, which is select this column and make sure go to the home button and change this to general. That's important. Then use the trim function equals trim parentheses, select the cell, close the parenthesis, hit enter. So you see the space is gone, right? Now you repeat the same for the rest. All you need to do now is copy to the bottom. For that, you need to double click here at the bottom. Do you see that? Right bottom corner. Voila. You see that? So this is how you will trim the data, which is an extension of parsing. So I hope you enjoyed it. Okay, now we're going to talk about, and I'm going to show you a quick data trick in Excel specific to using or formatting date format related to the dates. For this, we're going to use the data set, let's say disaster declarations. Okay, I'm going to click on that. Let me clean this. Okay, let me try again. Disaster declaration. It's downloading the data set. I'm waiting for it. Okay, so it has downloaded the dataset. I'm opening the dataset now. Now, this particular dataset has information specific to the disasters and when the disasters were declared. We are really interested in this particular column, the date of declaration of the disaster. Now, as you can see, the date is in the month, day, and year format. So this information, you cannot use this column information to kind of summarize and see which month are commonly the months, which of the months are most disaster reported months, which days are most common days, if that's of interest to you. So we need to parse this. We need to change the date in a way that would help us give declutter this information into month, year, and the day. So that's what we'll do. For that, again, first thing first, you have to create your own data book and save it as something else. So you can always go back to this and save in a place that you put all the information for a particular assignment that you're working on at any given point of time. Um, so I'm creating this for videos. So I'm going to say this, I'm going to save it as data. So the original file is always there, and this is my version of it. Now what you need to do is, because there are 2 bits of data, I'm going to create 3 bits of data. I'm going to create 3 different data columns. Insert once, twice, thrice. So I have 3 data sets. Now what I want is year, month, and not just date. I want day. Um, so the function is very simple. What you need to do is use the Excel's month function, year function. For day, it's slightly different. Um, and first thing first, before you use this function, you need to make sure that each column is of a general type. If you don't do that, then it won't take the formula. So save it. And the formula is pretty simple. Equals, you want year, right? Just type year. Then select parentheses and select the cell. Close the parentheses, hit enter. See, it has extracted year from this. I'm going to do it again. Equal sign, year, parentheses, select the cell, close the parentheses, hit enter. Now to copy this throughout the column, I'm going to double click here. That's it. You see that? Now the next thing is same thing for the month. Let's do it without changing it to the general and see what happens. Equals month, select this, close it. Do you see that? It didn't do anything, right? It actually didn't extract the month. So I'm going to delete it and make sure select the column and change that to general. Although it says general, it's not necessarily all the cells are of the general type. So now save it and put the formula in. Equal sign, month, select the cell from which you're extracting, close the parenthesis, hit enter. You see that? 5th month, so phi indicates the month. Now double click and you're copying this to the rest of the cells in the column. Now here's the thing. If you just want the day, which is like 2, you can use the same formula, but we want not just the date, but the day. Now this is where you'll use a different kind of formula. And so what you do, now again, first you need to make sure it is general, save it, then eh, then equals, then put the formula text, parentheses, select the cell, comma, this is where you have to put in quotation marks D, 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 where you're asking the day in full form. Then close the parentheses, hit enter. It says Saturday. So 2nd of May 1953 was a Saturday. I'm going to do it again. Equals. I'm putting in caps so you can see it. Okay, I'm going to do it again. Equals, right? Text, open parentheses, select the cell, comma, then put the format date, which is quotation marks, open, D, D, I'm gonna D, 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 close the quotation mark, close the parentheses, and hit enter. Oops, something happened. I'm gonna check that. Uh, let's do it again. Text, parentheses, year, comma, quotation mark, D, 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 close the parenthesis, close the quotation mark, close the parenthesis, hit enter. Saturday. And you're going to copy this to the rest of the column, the rest of the cells in the column. So that's how you do use the data format in Excel sheet.